Hey everyone, and welcome back. It's been a while. My usual opening phrase. Life's just been really busy at the moment. Just had a lot of things going on, and just haven't had much time to record. But as you can see, my I'm in a little bit of a different location to where I usually record my videos. I basically bought a gaming laptop just because working in my little office space and trying to record videos, I was just feeling very claustrophobic and that. So I bought a gaming laptop to work from, but also so I could do stuff like this from different areas of my house or out and about. So it just allows me that kind of recording diversity, if you will. And if I'm working in my little office room, I'm not feeling like I just want to get the hell out of there at the end of the day, rather than recording stuff. So maybe I can work from here and then go sit in there and do some videos, or vice versa. But yeah, so long story short, now I have mobile tools as well as my little office. So, it just frees me up to record more often. Um, yeah, so getting into it, Scream 7 is out. Scream is one of my favorite franchises. If you haven't followed any of the previous videos, sorry about this. I got a really bad fucking neck ache as well. I need to get a new pillow. Um, yeah, along with Jurassic Park, Scream is like my number two franchise, and as with Jurassic Park recently, Scream had its seventh installment. I was really looking forward to this film, and one thing with this one is I pretty much muted for the last month or so, muted a lot of the promotion, like the trailers and things like that on social media. Um, there was one thing I was a bit like, I'm not sure if I spoke about this at some point before or not, but there was one thing that was not annoying me, but I think it's not particular Scream. It's just the movie industry as a whole at the moment in terms of marketing. They're just going down this whole one half of it is just AI slop. And since unmuting all the accounts and things like that, I'm just seeing, that on screen has done what every other fucking film does, and it's just so uncreative because they've just got like these AI templates where they just take a landmark and stick something to do with the film on that landmark. Like for Scream, they had the what was it? Was it like something in London? It just had a giant scream mask on it, and I'm just like, this is just shit. It's it's just a lazy slop. Whatever you think of AI, it's just lazy marketing. Oh, like oh, here's it wasn't Big Ben, but I've seen Big Ben on like I think like Wicked did Big Ben and other stuff. It's just like, oh, here's a landmark. Let's stick something to do with the film on it. Oh, that'll sell the film. It's like, no, no one's going to see that on Instagram or Twitter and be like, oh, I'm going to go watch Scream because they fucking hung a mask from Big Ben or something like that. It's just dumb. Um, and the other thing was like, this film was like shameless with tie-ins, and I think like before I did the old the mutant, I saw like it had a Jeep Cherokee tie-in with a rapper, and the old Screams had like they had the Creed song in Scream 3, and I know Scream 2, like most 90s slasher films, had a lot of songs on the soundtracks because them soundtracks were like big sellers anyway. But this, I just and again, since I'm muting it, I'm just like, there's so many like fucking weird tie-ins. There was like Reese's Pieces in England had a tie-in for Scream, and I'm just like, it's just so weird and peculiar. It's like there's just a template to follow now, and it's like it's not about in terms of the marketing. And I've dabbled in movie marketing previously with like the Jurassic stuff and all of that. It doesn't seem like there's no creativity there. There's no sort of like and it's not necessarily the people behind its fault. It could just be the studios and things like that, being like, oh, we want to just follow this template that's been in place. It'll get us X amount of engagement, and we can all pat ourselves on the back and eat sushi. But it's not. it's not valuable, it's not valuable, impressions. It's not valuable engagement. It's just crap. I don't honestly think I see any Scream tie-ins that I think added bums on seats, added to the revenue at the box office. It just looks like shit. And and again, another thing that you can tell that it's just going down this, um, pathway of, like, this preset pathway of just lazy advertising is, all the cinemas doing Scream popcorn buckets and whatnot. And it's like, yeah, with kids' films, yeah, or maybe like super geeky films where, you get like collectors, like toy collectors and things, like adult toy collectors and things like that. But Scream is none of those. And I don't think Ghostface is it's a highly recognizable figure, but it's not a highly collectible and must-have, um, IP, because in the UK you have like clothes shops, and there's one called Primark, which it's not so much anymore, but it's always been kind of a budget, fashion outlet. And you can get band shirts and things like that. Like, you go online or HMV and or places like that, and you'll get like a Guns N' Roses shirt, and it'll cost you like 30 quid. Whereas you go in Primark and you get a decent Guns N' Roses shirt for like 12 quid. So that shows you sort of, and they do have a lot of IPs in there. They were big on the Stranger Things stuff and things like that. But they've always, for the last few years, had Ghostface stuff in there, and it's always been present at the clearances at the end of that season. So, to me, that's like, oh, everyone knows Scream, everyone knows Ghostface, but it's not a highly must-have property like when, I think when the Wednesday stuff come out for the, the TV show, that flew off the shelves. That's a highly marketable, and must-have property, in terms of merchandise. But anyway, 7 minutes into this, I wanted to keep it short, but I saw Scream 7. I went opening night last week, but I've only just, it's Tuesday today. Um, and yeah, I've only just had time to sit down and record this because we went late Friday night. Saturday, I was volunteering at Park Run. I was the 27-minute pacer. And then I had a load of stuff to sort out. And I had a half marathon on Sunday, um, and had like dinner and that afterwards with the family. And then, Sunday night. Well, I can't remember what happened Sunday night. I think I just like flopped on the sofa and I watched Battle Los Angeles. And yeah, and just, yeah, back into the workflow. But yeah, Screen 7, I kind of went in it, with as little recent spoiling as possible. But even before I muted stuff, there was stuff like flying around online and trailers and that. And I want to give you my initial thoughts, spoiler free, and then I'm going to kind of give a spoiler warning and like wrap up the last bit a bit. Um, it's one thing that's bothered me with the last couple of Scream films, or at least Scream. I felt it more in Scream 6, but there was a big element of it in Scream 5 with the Maca house, the Marker house, is that because that was shot on a in a studio, it just felt really artificial, the Maca house. And with Scream 6, um, it was set in New York, but it clearly wasn't New York. It was like, I think it was like, was it like somewhere in Canada or like Detroit and that? And other than sort of like the aerial shots, it didn't feel like New York. Like the scene where, was it Sam and, God, I've already forgotten their names. Who are the Carpenter sisters? Um, yeah, where they're in the park, and it's just like, this ain't New York. This is like Toronto or something. But there was a real artificial feel around those two films. And the one thing that, like, my biggest gripe with those two films, other than other things, were that, the original Scream trilogy, especially Scream 1, and even Scream 3 to that effect, was very location heavy and very visual. Scream 1 was set in Woodsboro, which is like Northern California, and they've got these beautiful rolling hills, like the shots of the countryside outside Sydney's house, and even Casey's house, and everything just felt very open. And I'm not sure if that was done, I think one of the purposes of that was also to make you feel how isolated all of these houses were. But but Scream 2 had that with the college. It was very visually pleasing, and Scream 3 was set in Hollywood, but you had all the big wide Hollywood shots, and yeah, and it felt like you could breathe, and I didn't feel like you could have that with the two before Seven. Scream 7, I felt like there was a little bit more of that involved with it, but other than the opening scene where it's like it's shot outside, but it doesn't fit. It's obviously the set of Stu Mucker's house, and I saw this earlier with an interview with Kevin Williamson where he said about the opening shot was like done last and tagged on last because after they had wrapped, they were like, we don't really have a proper opening, so they had the Stu Macker house set sitting in storage, so they'd done that opening shot. But yeah, I feel like in terms of a visual, a weird way to start this review is talk about like how the film looks in terms of like location and scenery. But from the start, I appreciated you've seen it in the trailers, so it's not a spoiler that Stu Marker's house gets burned down. So for that, it's kind of forgivable because it's like, oh, they're not gonna you know burn down the real house. And there's only that shot of them kind of walking in the house. So did it really make sense for them to go on location just to walk in the house and then do everything else elsewhere? But so that was forgivable. But I found that the rest of the film, did have a little bit more breathability than the last two. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot I could talk to about this film. Maybe I'll do a bit more of a deep dive into it rather than and keep this more to an initial review. Um, you know, I enjoyed seeing Sydney back as the front and center. I feel like that's what the last two films missed. And I wasn't not a fan of the Carpenter girls and that, but Sydney is the Jamie Lee, isn't she? It's whether you like or don't like some of the Halloween sequels, the ones with Jamie Lee Curtis in are by far, miles above the ones without her in. Even Halloween Resurrection, from like, the point she left that movie or was like killed off, it just went downhill. Um, even though it wasn't that great before, but it still felt like Halloween. But yeah, it was good to see Sydney back in the front and center of this film, and her life now kind of, you know, in Scream 5, she was pulled into the story, whereas this one, the story goes to her. So, it was good to see her family and, her day-to-day life and how she was living. It's quite funny that, that they pulled the bait and switch with Mark, her husband, because there's a comment about how it's Mark and the kids, which everyone was like, oh, that's Mark Kincaid from Scream 3, um, who she kind of romanticized at the end of Scream 3 to a point, and it turns out it's not Mark, it's another policeman named Mark. But that's only because Patrick Dempsey couldn't line up the time shooting schedule and whatnot. So because this one was very last minute to a point where you had the previous characters, the Carpenter sisters, wrapping up their trilogy with Scream 7, but there was all that shit with that it didn't happen. So I assume that, someone like Dempsey's a very consistent worker, especially in TV. So, his schedule was probably like a lot more harder to line up. But, the Mark in this one, he was all right. It was just, again, it's just so much to talk about, and I haven't got the time to talk about it all. I wanted to keep this to 10 minutes. I'm already at 15. Um, Probably going to jump into spoiler territory in a second. So maybe I'll just break down my likes other than the visuals and then go into my dislikes and hit the spoiler line there. So What I liked about the film, other than the visuals, I felt like it felt more Scream, which again comes down to those visuals and the sets. I felt like Ghostface was a lot more menacing in this one in terms of how he is as a Ghostface. The the last movie at least, he was I felt Ghostface was good in five, and he was brutal. But in six, I felt he wasn't as Ghostfacey, and I think there was elements of the ways that he killed and did some of the kills, like in the bodega, like it wasn't Ghostface, he's running around with a shotgun and stuff like that. Whereas this one, he kind of went, it was like more back to Ghostface's roots. I enjoyed, yeah, the reintroduction of some past characters. There's a really popular scene, which I'll jump into in a second after the spoiler cut off. Um, and two of those reoccurring characters, Chad and Mindy, that I've again that some might think that they're like the red-headed stepchild now in this film because they're the Carpenter twins characters being pulled into this one. Um, but I wasn't a fan of the reason they were there. I was just felt that it felt a bit shoehorned in, and it was like I can't see how they got from where they were in five and six to placing them where they are now. Um, and in but should I say, I do like their characters. I do enjoy watching their characters. They kind of shoehorned them why they were there, but they weren't kind of shoehorned into the story, is what I'm trying to say. So I enjoyed watching them, and if we do get a Scream 8, I hope to see them back because, you know, for what some might people say, like, depending how Scream 8 plays out, five and six might be like the Thorn movies from Halloween, where it's like, oh yeah. But I hope to see them back and maybe in a much larger capacity. Um, I'm probably gonna have to jump over the spoiler line now. Yeah, so spoilers ahead. I don't think anyone will be watching this anyway, who doesn't or does care about spoilers. So yeah, the Gal Weathers coming back. Her reintroduction into the story was pretty cool. So basically, Sydney and her family get attacked at night, and there's this big like Lethal Weapon style front lawn punch up with Ghostface and Mark and Sydney joining in, and um, outside on the front lawn, and then like Ghostface rolls into the road and then stands up and is about to attack them, and then gets hit by a 4x4, and it's and pretty much creamed across the road. And it turns out it's Gal Weathers, and Chad and Mindy are her cameraman. Is it Dwight from Scream 2? Basically, they're Dwight. They're the Dwight of Scream 7. Um, and yeah, and that was a cool reintroduction. But what I liked about a reintroduction as well is like, they've actually killed the ghost face. What's going on here? Is this gonna and stuff happens where you're like, oh, this can't be like a copycat who's, like the guy in Halloween 2 who they in the Michael Myers outfit that they run over, and it's just a kid who's in the wrong place at the wrong time. Things happen where you're like, oh, this is the real Ghostface. And they unmask him, and you're like, who the fuck is this guy? And there's actually a line where they're like, who the fuck is that guy? And it turns out that he was an escaped mental patient, and Sydney had seen him in there's a scene in her coffee shop earlier in the film where she hands him a coffee and he just looks at her really suspect. And it's only a flash shot, and for a minute I was like, is that? I thought it was actually Stu, Matthew Lillard, and she's just seeing things. Um, but no, it wasn't. It was just a guy with like a beardy, scruffy guy. And it just turns out that after this occurrence, she gets is it after that or before that? Oh no, it's before that. She gets a a phone call from Ghostface, and then it flips, and he's saying, like blah 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 blah. you know, like hinting at like we knew each other before and things like that, and then it goes to a FaceTime call, and it's Stu, with all the scars on his face, and yeah, and it's and again, this was hinted at in the opening scene where they're like, "Oh, did Stu really die?" They he had the TV dropped in his head, which they're obviously referring to the Stab movies, but it's a play on Scream One as well, where it's like he had a TV dropped on his head, but like he's the only one who didn't get shot in the head because one of the rules in Scream is they're only dead if you shoot them in the head. Um, so yeah, and it's Stu on this call, and she's like, oh, and she's like back and forth of with it, is it really Stu or not? Or and there's talk goes on about is this AI deep faking and things like that. But with the issue you have with that is the nostalgia baiting because he says so many little things like references to Scream One, which are like, well, only Sydney and him know these exchanges of words and things like that. And how would the deepfake Stu know about these words, even if he was pulling these references from Stab movies? But Gal wrote the first Stab, and Sydney wasn't a fan of her at all back then, so she likely or didn't give her sort of report on what happened to Gal to use for the Stab movies. Um, but yeah, and it turns out like they go on this like hunt to like who was this guy? It turns out they're in this mental asylum, um, and they're like, oh, what was his name? It was like Five or something. And see, this is coming to my problem now of like, the one of my big issues with the movie is like, oh yeah, he was here and he used to be friends with, um, or not be friends. Like Sydney shows a picture of Stu, like a screenshot, and they're like, and the and the guy, the nurse is like, oh, that's Bob or something, and they're like, he was here up until recently. He was down the hallway. Do you want to see his room and that? And they're like, what the fuck? Because at that point they're like tossing and turning between is Ghostface real or is he Stu real or alive or is it just you know, is it a deep fake? Because it turns out that Stu never had like there was no burial records of Stu being buried and like coroner's reports and things like that. So they're like, oh, is he actually alive or is someone making it look like he's alive? But yeah, I'm dragging this on way too long, but sort of as it gets into the third act, like I feel like this film is really good and there's some really good kills, but then as you gets into the third act, it really starts to wobble. Ghostface attacks the kids, if you will, and starts running after Tatum, Sydney's daughter. And there's a curfew, which is set like again nostalgia bait for the first movie, even like the Red Right Hand and all of that, and the way that it's like set up. She's running down the street and there's like no one about, it's like it's not like, oh, there's a curfew. It's like this is impossible because there's shops and all of that, but there's like stuff above the shops, so you'd be like, these are at least residential units here and that, and just no one is about. There's no police, which you'd expect from a curfew, which kind of took me out of it a little bit. And secondly to that is that with Tatum as well, all of her friends pretty much get slaughtered, and her first friend gets slaughtered in front of her. And I like the Tatum character. I like the relationship she had with her mum, Sydney, but she just doesn't. It doesn't phase her for more than about 2 seconds that all her friends are getting killed and are like slaughtered in front of her. And it's just, and there's a scene with the boyfriend as well where it's just like she thinks it's him, but it doesn't go like it's like almost like a mirror with Billy, where she's like, "Oh my God, it's you," because she finds his computer with the deep faking on, and he's like, "No, no, I was just testing to see if it was like it was possible and that." And then Ghostface comes out, and then she gets chased, but later on the boyfriend's there, and then he gets killed, and she's like, "Oh no!" And then literally, I don't know, like in the UK, the Jeremy Clarkson meme of like, "Oh no!" Anyway. Um, That's pretty much that moment with her. And there's a really stupid moment with like shooting through the wall with her. Not so much the shooting through the wall, but like she's barricaded herself in the office and she shoots Ghostface through the wall and then just fucking walks out. And it's like, and the whole cinema at that moment, because she's on the phone with Sydney, like her mum, he's like, "You got to shoot him through the wall," and da 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 da, because he's going to get in. And she shoots him through the wall, and then she just fucking starts pulling, like, unblocking the wall and goes out there, like the doorway. And even Sydney would be like, "Don't go out there," you know. You'd assume she'd say that. Um, but yeah, she's just that was a really stupid moment, and like the whole cinema just like gasped, like, oh, when that moment happened. But yeah, I want to wrap this up now because it's getting too long. And just talk about the ending quick. Is this movie had the worst killer reveal, sorry, and killers of the franchise. They were so nothing killers. I thought that, the Scream 6 killers were a little bit weak, which was Richie's family, but they had motive. This one, it was Sydney's neighbor is in the film for like 5, 10 minutes, but doesn't even, you know, she's just an annoying neighbor. And the guy, the nurse from the mental asylum, who's in the film for about a minute, um, you're just like, what is going on? And the motive for the neighbor, the lady neighbor, is that yeah, she was inspired by Sydney, and she killed her abusive husband and become obsessed with Sydney, but then got pissed off because Sydney didn't go to New York, so she didn't feel like she was the heroine that she thought she was, and that made her mad enough to go on you know a killing spree. After conveniently she checked herself into a mental asylum and became friends with the guy who got run over and the nurse guy. And I don't even remember, and I've tried looking it up, and no one can still has pointed it out what the motive for the nurse guy was. Because all he does is he goes, I used to work for Google in AI, which is obviously how they did like the deep faking and all of that. But there's kind of no clear motive for him. It's like, yeah, you did that, but why are you now a serial killer? You know? And it was just such a fucking like stumble at the last hurdle in this movie. And yeah, and after that it was just the usual Scream. They have a fight, the fake out death, and then it's a happy ending. And yeah, so like in a nutshell, this film probably would have been a solid 7.5 out of 10 for me, but probably with that ending, probably knocked it down to a 6 and the weakest killers in the franchise. They had a chance to do something good with, especially like the build up with Stu. And like when Sydney goes at the end back to her house because Ghostface has kidnapped her daughter after that shooting through the wall debacle. Um, they have all like the TVs and the smart tablets in the house. Stu's speaking through them, and then it sort of like morphs over, and you've got Billy's mum, Debbie Salt, or Mrs. Loomis. You've got Roman, Bridger, and they even bring back Dewey uh, for it as well, for some reason. And yeah, it was just like a weird selection of people. It's like, obviously they needed the actors back and that, but you know, it's just yeah, just kind of with all this build up and all of that, it's like they should have just fucking gone with the Stew still alive. I think people would have been a lot less pissed off with that or disappointed in that because I think everyone's disappointed with this ending. And yeah, I think, unless they're building this up for like Scream 8, that Stu is still alive, which, could be a redeeming factor for it. And maybe if, you know, there is, I don't think there will be, but if there was any resolution to bring back the Carpenters, like the Sam Carpenter who had Billy like in her head. Um, that was the original planned seventh movie. The end of that trilogy was that Billy actually turns her into the serial killer for the last movie. So you can imagine if like in a perfect world, you'd be like, you know what, the best ending to this movie franchise as a whole would be to, if you could bring them two worlds back together, is have the two killers as Stu and Sam, but Sam like basically channeling Billy's spirit or whatever it is, or just her bad genes. Um, but yeah, overall, I was generally happy with the film until that last act where it just started going downhill. Um, and yeah, I left the film a bit like deflated by it because I was like, man, it had so much potential, and there was a lot of, I weren't expecting, the best Scream sequel ever, but that was just such a crap ending for a good build up. But the movie's making bank, so there will probably be a Scream 8. Kevin Williamson, I was just surprised how much of a flop that ending was, considering he was writing it. But hey, um, yeah. So I think the magic of the original Screams were Kevin Williamson and um, Wes Craven, because obviously Scream 3 was, up until this point, probably still my weakest Scream. Um, and it was most definitely Kevin Williams, Wes Craven's weakest Scream, but that's the one where Kevin Williamson wasn't involved in, and this is the Kevin Williamson one where Wes Craven's not involved in. So obviously those two make the magic together, not separate. So yeah, because Williamson did the script in that for Scream 4, which was one of the better sequels. But yeah, I think the film's going to make a lot of money and there will be a Scream 8. I just hope it's a lot better. It can kind of not pick up where this one left off because I don't want it to. I want to kind of have this one pick up from the second act of this movie in terms of, quality rather than, that ending. And I think this film's going to have the most forgettable killers by far because I'm already fucking forgetting their names and the motives. But yeah, there's my Scream review of sorts. I want to probably do more of a deep dive into all of the films as now I've got the equipment for it. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.